In today's show, Jusuf Nurkic helps Bosnia upset Slovenia at Eurobasket, and the Blazers add another center to compete for a roster spot. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen every day. At least every day there is a show. We are 3 days a week here through first couple weeks of September, and then we're going to get rolling back 5 days a week as your only daily Trailblazers podcast. But for now, 3 days a week, typically Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Make it your first listen every day. We got a fun show for you today to make it your first listen. Jusuf Nurkic helps Bosnia upset Slovenia. I was able to watch this Eurobasket contest because it came on at a reasonable time. We'll talk all about Nurk's performance, kind of what it might mean and what it looks like, and help us make sense of it heading into the Blazers season. Portland also added Olivier Sarr on an Exhibit 10 deal, bringing him into training camp, likely to compete for their second two-way contract. We'll get to know Sarr a little bit and what's ahead for a potential new Blazers big man addition. And finally, we'll close the show talking about best backcourts in the Western Conference. I saw a view shared by Isaac Harris, host of Locked On Mavs. Maybe I got a bone to pick, or at least I got something to discuss about best backcourts in the West. Let's start with Nurk, though. Bosnia coming in was 1-1, and Nurk had played pretty well in the first game for Bosnia at Eurobasket. They're in the qualifying stages, the group stages, and then if they can finish high enough in the group, they can advance, and beating Slovenia today gives them a real shot, a legitimate shot at advancing. Big upset win for them, but opening game against Hungary, Nurk played well and they win. They lose the second game against host Germany, and Nurk just wasn't very efficient. Like, his numbers were good, but just like not a super efficient night. Mostly just bricking threes. Shot fine on 2-pointers, but not his best night in a loss. And then game 3, this first game I was able to watch. So the other two were 5:30 a.m. Pacific time, and I love hoops, but I might not love hoops 5:30 a.m. tip-off enough, or at least not Eurobasket enough for 5:30 tip-off. If you watch internationally and you watch Blazers and you regularly wake up at 5:30, I'm sorry I'm not as tough as y'all. I applaud the effort, but I was able to watch this game against Slovenia. Obviously, the Slovenian team is good. Like, Goran Dragic puts on a Slovenian jersey. He is fantastic. Luka Doncic was bad, capital B bad today, but was one of the best basketball players in the world. Maybe wasn't anticipated that he would be capital B bad today. And so I was excited to watch Nurk. Like, I was like, yeah, I'm buckling in. I'm gonna watch my man. And then Nurk struggled. His worst performance so far of Eurobasket. Goes 3 of 13 from the floor. Finished with 12 points, 9 boards, 4 assists. 4 assists, 3 steals, but 6 turnovers in 30 minutes. 3 of 13 from the field, 2 of 9 from 3. Probably just took a couple more 3-pointers than he really needed to. 2 of 9 from 2, 1 of 4 from 3. There was 1 3 late in the third quarter that he didn't need to take. Did make his free throws. He'd been struggling at the free throw line, and he made his free throws in this one. 5 of 5 from the stripe. He played pretty well. This one was close. Like, it was a 1-point game heading into the fourth quarter. Nurk sat for the first 4.5 minutes of the fourth, and then he came in and it was a 4-point game, and like immediately Luka Doncic gets a switch on him and gets up and under, cuts the lead to 2, but Bosnia's holding on late. They come down with under a minute left, 2-point game. Slovenia needs 1 stop to give themselves a chance. The Bosnia misses, but the rebound bounces along, and in the scramble for the rebound, a Slovenian player grabs the board and falls out of bounds. Bosnia gets the ball back. Slovenia is forced to foul, and they hold on, make their free throws, and hold on and win. This was all about my man John Robertson hit 7 threes, Bosnian guard. He kind of bailed them out. And Donzan Musa had 22 points, 5 boards, 5 assists for Bosnia. Nurk, he didn't necessarily get bailed out by his teammates, but late in this game, Bosnia won this game by just making threes. Their offense kind of, I don't know if it's stalled, that's probably not the right word, but they were having trouble getting clean looks, and John Robertson hit 3 late threes late, and Donzan Musa hit another one, and that's why they won this game. They won this game the strength of 3-pointers. Musa was really good. Robertson hit his threes. That's enough for him. more than anything, I was watching this game not for like selfishly, I wish Nurk had played better, right? I wish I was like all on the Bosnian Beast hype train right now, but he struggled. He struggled in this one. A couple thoughts on Nurk's performances and kind of how they work in Blazerland, how they translate to Blazerland. Offensively, I thought he too often caught the ball too far from the paint. They tried to post him up, and in FIBA you can be more physical, so it's easier to like push guys away from the paint. But he was catching the ball, 3 to 4 full steps before he could get feet in the paint. I think he needed to catch deeper. Some of that is the physicality. Some of that is Nurk's fault for kind of just saying, "Give me the ball," and like turning around and saying, "I'm going to post up here. I need the ball." And then it's the guard's fault. I think the guard play, they shot making late, but the guard play from Bosnia leaves a little something to be desired in terms of just like getting them into good stuff and finding their focal point. Maybe if Nurk hadn't struggled so much, like I said, 2 of 9 from 2, like if he hadn't struggled so much making 2-pointers, making shots, he would have had more touches, but like they feed into each other, right? Like I thought his catches were a little too far from the rim. You see that in the NBA for sure with Nurk, is that when he catches deeper, like heels on the paint or heels close to the paint, like he can turn and one power dribble, shoulder into you and make a move. Other times it's like, it's easier to send a double because he's farther from the rim. It's easier to flop because he's going to have to bump into you 4 times. And it's easier to just hold him up. And then Nurk has to shoot flips and hooks and all of those, little touch shots he likes further away from the paint. I thought that was a problem. On offense, they also ran him for the high post, and I thought a couple times from the high post he just forced a couple passes. They were in a close game, close, highly contested game, so a couple of the turnovers not necessarily his fault, but he had one when he came in the fourth quarter. They run like a horn set, and he gets the ball in the right wing, and he immediately just looked to throw a lob. The lob wasn't there, and he forced it and turned the ball over. It's like his first touch after sitting for about 8 minutes to open the quarter, 6.5 minutes to open the quarter. Yeah, just bad decision making. There was some Nurk stuff in this game where it was like he had some stuff not go his way, and then he tries to force it. He had one in the third quarter where he didn't make a shot inside. He hustled the other way. They got a turnover. They come back, and he's like, "I'm just going to go," and he bowled a guy over and got an offensive foul. The patience of Nurk just wasn't totally there today. He struggled. It's basketball. He struggled. It's not a big deal. But he had some issue. On defense, though, I thought this was an interesting look at, in some ways, the way the Blazers will play. The Bosnia played a kind of brought Nurk up on pick and rolls. They brought Nurk up like just below the level of the screen. So he's ducking like just below the level screen, like a barely a drop defense. Like he's just below the screen level, kind of corral the guy and allow his man to switch. Kind of more like a drop coverage principles, because they're not trying to switch and they're not trying to hedge super hard and show to the ball, but it's enough to corral, show on pick and rolls. Like he for sure is showing on a pick and roll and then recovering. I would like to see the Blazers do this more. I think sometimes the Blazers late in the season conceded the switch too much. When the Bosnia conceded a switch late in this game, Luka Doncic got the switch he wanted, which was Nurk, and took him to work. Like, it's not a problem that Jusuf Nurkic can't guard Luka Doncic on the perimeter. That is not like a big deal. You just want to avoid it. Schematically, you just want to avoid it. So to me, I liked the way Bosnia had that kind of like soft show and recover defense. I think that is a good way to use Nurk. What he wants to do is he doesn't want to play drop all the time. Like, Nurk wants to be aggressive and show a little bit and get up in ball handlers and use his fast hands. Like, he has really good hands. Sometimes his feet are too slow, but he has good hands on defense. He's a good, like, he has a high steal rate for a center, and he wants to be involved in those pick and roll actions so he can use that high steal rate. But just like a straight up switch or trying to double team and recover doesn't maximize what Nurk does well, because what Nurk does well is be gigantic and in the paint. Late in this game, Bosnia went to zone, particularly when Nurk was on the bench, but they played a little bit of zone when he came back too. That's what the Blazers are going to do, right? They're going to play a bunch of zone this year. They're going to play aggressive defense. They're going to not let Nurk be in like a deep drop. All of that, I thought he looked pretty good on defense. Like, Luka Doncic was 0 for 8 from 3 and only got to the free throw line one time in this game. That matters. Like, the Bosnia won this game on hot shooting and good defense. They did not let, when Slovenia had, down 4 with 3.5 minutes left, needed to win the final 3.5 minutes by 5, they didn't do it. And they kept Luka out of the paint with their zone defense. They kept Luka out of the paint by loading up against him. They did a really nice job defensively, and Nurk was part of that defensive approach, to be certain. I wish Nurk had played a little better so we could celebrate it here, but such is life. There's 2 more games remaining for Bosnia in the qualifying rounds, and we will talk about Nurk's performances after those. Big win for Bosnia. Put themselves in position to advance. Even if Nurk struggled on offense, he played well in other places, and that's what you want to see him do. That's like the key for him to be a success for the Blazers, is to pick up the pieces when he struggles and contribute in other ways. He absolutely did that. And I don't think the defense was that far away from what we will see the Blazers play defense this year. Not identical, but some parts that you could definitely see how this translates. So if you didn't catch this game, a couple others at least for you to catch Nurk playing later this week. Check them. All right, second segment. Blazers added a new player. Olivier Sarr signed to a Exhibit 10 contract, a training camp deal, according to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. He's likely going to compete for a 2-way spot. Let's talk about who Olivier Sarr is in the second segment. Before we do that, I want to tell you about Built Bar, best tasting protein bar that there is. Best tasting protein bar on the market. They're great because they pack a punch. On average, a Built Bar, 17 grams of protein, 140 calories, 5 grams of sugar, and 5 net carbs. So they got the macros that you need. They're going to fuel you up with a whole bunch of protein, but they also taste great. My personal favorite's peanut butter brownie and cookies and cream, but they also got a whole line of puff products for those of you who are marshmallowy fans, like cookie dough puff, and there's a s'mores puff that's pretty darn good too, with a little graham cracker and marshmallow action covered in chocolate. Whatever it is, go to Built.com, find what you like, and order more from there. And while you're there, save some money using the promo code LOCKED15. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Still a pass first point guard. And that's usually my intro to the third segment. We're doing it here anyways. All right. Blazers added a new player, Olivier Sarr, according to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, is going to join the program. An Exhibit 10 contract, which is essentially a training camp deal. It's inviting someone to training camp with there's some more details in it, but it's essentially a training camp contract, and it's a way to kind of lock a guy into committing to training camp. I'm in favor of it. A 7-footer. The Blazers need big man depth, and right now the only other person, this is the 4th training camp deal we've heard about. The Blazers now have 18, if you include those guys coming in on the roster. You can invite as many to 20 to training camp. I don't know if they'll get up to 20, but this is totally fine. You just have to cut down. You got to cut down to 15 and two ways by the end of training camp. So Sarr, who was on a 2-way deal with Oklahoma City last year, is likely to be competing for that second 2-way spot. Blazers got a couple guards competing for that 2-way spot, but really this is for. If I had to guess, because of the way the Blazers roster is constructed, they need big man depth. Like, they just need big man depth. They've got Nurk at center. They've got Drew Eubanks at center. They don't have anyone taller than 6'9" on the roster. Like, they just aren't very big. They're really comfortable going small, so they're going to play a bunch of small ball. So even if whoever makes it as their second 2-way guy, should they add one of Norvel Pell, a 6'10" center, or Olivier Sarr, a 7-foot center, like, even if they add one of those guys, neither of them are going to play. They're going to be a 2-way guy. It's insurance, but you need the insurance just because the front line is a little bit, it's shallow, right? Like, they're pretty shallow up front. So Sarr makes sense. Sarr is 23 years old. He started his career at Wake Forest, transferred to Kentucky, and finished his career there last year on a 2-way deal. He went undrafted in 2022 on a 2-way deal with Oklahoma City, in which he appeared in 22 games, including 2 starts, averaged 7 points, 4.2 rebounds, just shy of 1 assist, 0.3 steals, 0.7 blocks. Played 19 minutes a game, shot 57% from the floor, but the intriguing thing is a little bit of stretchiness in his game. Olivier Sarr was 13 of 29 from 3, 44.8% from 3. That's 13 made threes in 22 appearances. Like, this is, there's some intrigue, right? Like, if he can be big and physical, or at least like big, and with some added bonus of what big means, with some stretchiness, like, that's really appealing, right? Like, you want bigs, particularly backup bigs. Like, a backup big is not going to get a bunch of post touches. You're just not going to throw it into them unless they're like Enes Kanter in 2019, where it was like specific why he was on the team, right? Like, if you're a backup big, you are playing on, a second unit that's going to be either the focal point where Josh Hart gets to run a bunch of the offense, or a focal point where Anthony Simons gets to run a bunch of the offense. Like, you're going to be a pick and roll guy. And in this case, a pick and pop guy. And I think adding someone with, a 23-year-old who shot in limited action, right? Like in a limited number of attempts, but 45% from three. There's real appeal there. A 7-footer who can shoot it is really appealing, particularly as like an end of the bench guy. Like I don't think Olivier Sarr is going to change the world, but like as a second two-way contract, this is appealing. To be clear, and I probably have clarified this a couple times, so I don't want to clarify it here. The Blazers have 14 NBA roster players right now, so that means they have a 15th open roster spot. The guys going into camp: Isaiah Miller, Jared Rhoden, Olivier Sarr, along with Norvel Pelle, those four who are going to come into camp, conceivably, yes, they could compete for that 15th roster spot. But it doesn't really make sense that the Blazers would add another developmental part to the end of their bench. If they are going to add someone to roster spot 15, it's almost certainly just like competitive balance reasons, just like if the team wants to be as good as possible, a vet. They would add someone on a vet minimum contract. So if you're like, hey, maybe one of these dudes will make the 15th spot, I don't think that's a consideration. I think it's a consideration for who makes the final two-way spot. They've got those 14 roster players, an open 15th roster spot. They have the first two-way contract is occupied by Brandon Williams. The second two-way contract is open. A two-way contract is for guys with less than 4 years of experience in the NBA. It specifically does not count against the salary cap. Those players can't compete in the playoffs unless you convert them to regular NBA deals. But like that's a long way away. If someone earns it, a la Trent Watford, you convert it and figure it out, right? Like you make them. Give them an NBA deal, promise them some money, and make a commitment to someone who's earned the job and earned a pay raise, just like Trent Watford did. I don't think any of these guys are competing for that roster spot. So let's be clear about what they're competing for. They're competing for the second two-way deal, and because of like I mentioned up front, while Rhoden and Miller could conceivably, just like you add talent, right? Say these are clearly the best two players. Miller's a 6-foot point guard and Rhoden is a 6'6" wing. Like that's not an area of need for the Blazers. The need is up front. The need is forwards, guys who can play the big forward spot, power forward spot, and play center. The Blazers are going to play a bunch of minutes with Jeremy Grant and probably Justice Winslow at center this year, but you need size. This team needs more size. So it's going to come down to Pelle and Sarr. Pelle obviously has more NBA experience with 40 games, like basically twice as much NBA experience, but he's also older, so Sarr's upside might win out. I think while there are some other spots, like competition spots, like conceivably Josh Hart could win the starting role from Nazir Little, even though I don't think he won't. And, they'll be competing for the sort of the 7th, 8th minutes coming out of the training camp. This two-way spot is one of the most intriguing battles for the Blazers in training camp. Who wins it for my money, between Sarr and Pelle? This will be something to watch. For these guys, maybe like we won't, in the preseason games, the preseason action, we won't get to see them as much. But guys coming to camp early, practicing in camp, what they show on the practice court can help them win a job, win them opportunities. You get your foot in the door in the NBA, you get to stay there. It's a hard league to stick in. So this will be really intriguing for who gets that final two-way spot for the Blazers, and Sarr, a very, very, very legitimate chance. Like he's what they need. So if he's if he is who they go with, it's because they needed him, because they need more size on the roster. All right, I wanted to close the show talking about something I stole from Isaac Harris of Locked On Mavs. Locked On Mavs is just a friggin' great podcast, y'all. Even if you're not a Mavs fan, I think you'll enjoy it. Isaac and Nick do such a good job. It's so darn fun, and they're so darn consistent with it. But Isaac tweeted out a question. Where do the Mavs backcourt rank in the West? I believe his question was, how many backcourts are better than Luka Doncic and Spencer Dinwiddie? And my gut said, well, certainly one of them in the Northwest is, right? And then I looked at his mentions, and they weren't there. The Blazers didn't show up in there on Twitter. And so that got me thinking, like, okay, where would I rank the Blazers and the Mavs and the rest of the backcourts in the West? That's what I want to do to close the show, is talk about where Anthony Simons and Damian Lillard rank in the West. Join me there, won't you? Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Shout out to Isaac Harris, Locked On Mavs, for tweeting out the question: Where does the Luka Doncic, Spencer Dinwiddie backcourt rank in the West? I look through those mentions. I see a bunch of Mavs fans saying, hey, either first or maybe as low as third. I don't know. Like, they're really good. And I was like, huh. That's curious. I expected to see some Blazers in here and or Blazer votes in here. And part of me believes that because I am so accustomed to Portland's backcourt with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum being considered the best backcourt in the NBA or darn close to the best backcourt in the NBA. I don't think that is the outside perception anymore. And I think it's fair to say that Anthony Simons just doesn't have as big enough body of work being a really, really good NBA player that you could say, yeah, he's like, this is where they are. It's a wait and see thing. Ant can go claim the throne. He was so darn good when he got the keys. They're going to give him the keys as the number 2 option on offense again. Like, he has a chance to just like go ahead and remind everyone, or for the first time, introduce himself to many people who maybe didn't pay attention to the Blazers, who were scuffling last year. But the outside perception is not what it once was for the Blazers. The departure of CJ McCollum, Damian Lillard missing a year, and people kind of, did they forget? I don't know. Do they think that Dame was like dealing with, the perception around Dame is a little bit weird. I think for the first time in his career, he's truly, truly underrated. He may have been underappreciated in the past, but he was the first point guard taken in his draft class. He was basically a unanimous rookie of the year. He's been properly rated as good for most of his career. I think now, entering this season for the first time in his career, he is underrated. And that got me thinking. This question got me thinking, where would I rank the Blazers in the West? And if you're a new listener, I'm not a big rah-rah Blazer guy. In fact, most people think that I'm a hater because I'm kind of a pessimist at heart. But like this got me thinking. I think there are absolutely 2 unassailable backcourts that are better than the Blazers, and I don't really think that there's not much merit to argue here. Phoenix is a better backcourt than the Blazers. Chris Paul was phenomenal in the regular season last year, and Devin Booker is a rising superstar in the league. Like, they're wonderful. That's probably the best backcourt in the NBA. Even 37-year-old Chris Paul. He was really, really good in the first 85 games of the year, and then wheels fell off for the Suns. You may recall them losing by 35 at home in Game 7 and didn't go to the Western Conference Finals. Woof. But they did win the most regular season games in Suns history, and he was great and all those things. Like, he was fantastic. The Suns are the best backcourt in the West for my money. The second best backcourt in the West is still Steph and Klay. Klay is not what he once was. An Achilles injury, a torn ACL, 2 years removed from the game. He came back this season, and he wasn't quite himself. He doesn't have those moments where he is so deadly offensively that it's terrifying and you can't believe that he's the dude who plays off Steph Curry. He just hadn't had those. And he looked a little slow. And he didn't look like what he once was on defense. But in the NBA Finals, when they needed him and they put him on Jaylen Brown when the games mattered, he was fantastic. Final 4 games of that series, Klay Thompson was awesome on defense. He is not at his peak. And certainly Steph Curry is a 34-year-old getting older, but that's still right up there. I mean, if they've fallen off from the level they were at to whatever the next level is. They're still, to me, Golden State and Phoenix are the 2 best backcourts in the West. Then it gets a little tricky. You can go through the rest. Like, certainly, I do not think D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards are better than the Blazers. I think Anthony Edwards has a ceiling to be incredible, but I'm not even sure D'Angelo Russell is better than Anthony Simons today, right now. I'm maybe just not a believer. They were benching him for Jordan McLaughlin in playoff games. He wasn't even the best point guard on his roster. Get out of here. He's not in there. It's not Denver. Like, that's not what they're doing. Jamal Murray's really good, but they don't have that second tier player. Apologies to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. It's obviously not OKC, even as good as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is. I don't think it's either of the LA teams because of how far Russell Westbrook has fallen, because of whatever, Patrick Beverley's just, he's never been on that level. He's just never been that good, so he's not even in the conversation. The Clippers just don't have that many guards, so it's like, depending on who you consider a guard, I guess you could make the case. Like, if you think it's Paul George and Reggie Jackson, sure, I think you can make a compelling case, but like, is Paul really a 2? Do they have a 2? Who's the 2? I think that's my problem with them, is that they're not there, and so, yeah, like, the Clippers roster's good, but I don't know if they have the best backcourt in the league. It's not either of the teams in Texas, or either of the 2 bad teams in Texas, San Antonio and Houston. They're not there. It's not New Orleans for me with CJ McCollum and Herb Jones. I think you could debate whether Herb Jones is a 2 or not, but I think in their starting lineup, he's functionally the shooting guard. That one is close to debatable, but for me, Dame is like clearly a step above those guys enough such that it doesn't really matter. It's like pretty obviously not Utah with, I don't know exactly who's going to start there, but it's not like with Michael Conley and whoever is the starting 2 there. I guess Colin Sexton is going to be the starting 2 there. No, that is not a better backcourt. So really you're getting down to me to Memphis and Dallas, right? Those are the other teams that would be up there. I think you could make a compelling case that Memphis is better just because Desmond Bane has been better over the course of a full season than Ant has been. And he's a much better defensive player. So yeah, and Ja Morant is like MVP level. He's really good and ascending. So I think you could make a case that the Blazers are certainly behind now as we go through this exercise, behind Phoenix, behind Golden State, and probably Memphis, although that's there. For me, they're ahead of New Orleans. And then it's the Isaac Harris's question. Where do the Mavs rank? And I think this is curious because I will just throw my cards on the table. I'm not really a Spencer Dinwiddie believer. I just don't think he's very good. Not that he's bad. I don't mean that by any means, but like he's a creative passer with some good scoring chops, but his lows are low. He's really inconsistent. And when he's good, he's like, oh man, Spencer Dinwiddie's awesome. But then his lulls are dramatic and loud to me. But Luka Doncic is like one of the 5 best players in the NBA. And so like anyone across from Luka is going to be a really, 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 really good backcourt. So I'll say it here today, and you can forward this one to Isaac Harris. Forward this one to the good folks at Locked On Mavs. I think the Blazers have a better backcourt than Dallas because I think Damian Lillard I think people are forgetting how good Dame was when he was healthy. Sure, he has some defensive limitations, but his offense was at one of the 5 best offensive players in the NBA, an offense all unto himself the last time we saw him healthy. And Anthony Simons has the potential to rocket into like that sort of, top. I mean, for my money, he could be one of the top 10 players at his position pretty quickly. Like he's that good. I think he could be that good. And I think that class puts them there. They haven't done it. The argument for them is they haven't done it yet. Is that we haven't seen a bunch of Ant's, only a third of Ant's minutes through the first 4 years of the season first 4 years of his career have been next to Dame. And Dame's minutes, and Dame just didn't play very well last year and then he was hurt. So it's been a while and we haven't seen it. So I can understand why people wouldn't see it, but I still think it's a top 5 backcourt in the West. I still think this is arguably the 4th best backcourt in the West. I think if you really got pinwheel-colored glasses on, Rose City-colored glasses on, you could make a case that they're the 3rd best backcourt in the West. I probably have them more at 4. I have them in that 4-5 range, probably 4 just ahead of Dallas. Part of it is because I think the Blazers are like a tier above New Orleans, and I think they're a tier above whoever you consider the other guard in with the Clippers. I don't think other teams really have a case for it. That doesn't mean that they're not good. It just means that they don't necessarily have a case for it. So yeah, I think after all this, after the dust settles and the Blazers come back with a backcourt, a new look backcourt of people you're familiar with, I think they're still one of the top 5 backcourts in the West. I still think they're putting themselves in a position to be right there. Still pretty darn good. I'm excited to see it. That's going to do it for today's show. We've got more shows coming later this week. Make sure you're listening. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on wherever you get podcasts. Tell your friends to do the same. Whenever we got shows, make sure it's your first listen. Whenever you see it pop up in your feed, make it your first listen each and every day. Tell your friends about the show. That would help. That's how people find out about podcasts is word of mouth. So if you enjoy the show, tell your friends. Maybe they will enjoy it too. I appreciate you listening. Talk to you soon.